asked Daddy to drop me off at the rec center after we finished grocery shopping. I wanted to watch Sean playing ball. You going there to play some games, or you going there to bother your brother? Daddy asked, pulling up in front of the gray building kids went to after school sometimes and on the weekends. The building always smelled sweaty, and the sound of kids running around the gym and game room echoed all over the place, then got all muffled, like the noises were drowning in their own sound. He won't care, I said. Once he got used to the idea that he'd have to walk home with me, I figured he'd just have to accept it. It's not like I followed him around that much. Daddy rolled his window down and I leaned in and kissed him on the cheek. You two be careful, he said, rolling up the window real fast so the snow wouldn't blow in. I shivered, pulled my hat down over my ears, and ran inside. The minute Sean saw me, he frowned. 2 of the guys he was playing with were deaf, and one of them signed, "Babysitting time?" Sean signed a curse back, one that a lot of hearing people knew. He chucked the ball to another guy and took a timeout, coming over to me. He was wearing a pair of old blue shorts and a t-shirt that had this cartoon guy walking down the street in a long robe. Underneath the guy it said, "Keep on trucking." The shirt used to belong to Daddy, but somehow Sean had inherited it. There was a big dark patch of sweat under his collar. "What are you doing here?" he asked. I shrugged. There wasn't anything to do at home. Sean looked at me. One of the guys was waving for him to come on, and Sean signed for him to wait. "Can't you see he's talking?" I said, and Sean gave me a look. "Sit down," he said. "I'm almost done." He tapped me on the head and ran back over to his game. The tap on the head meant he wasn't mad at me for coming. I climbed onto the bleachers and sat down in front of some girls who were watching the game. "That's your brother?" one of them asked me. I looked at her and nodded, then turned back front. "He can't hear anything?" I heard her asking my back. I knew what was coming, so I didn't turn around again. "Nope." "Dag," she said. "That's messed up." I heard another girl saying, "And he's a fine brother man, too." I rolled my eyes and felt my hands clenching inside my coat pockets. No wonder he's not trying to talk to us. I wanted to say, he's not trying to talk to you because he's not interested in you. But I didn't say anything. What was the use? Instead, I watched Sean and his friends play full court. Sean took a shot and missed, and then looked over at me and shrugged. Then he looked at the girls behind me and ducked his head a bit before taking off down the court. "Those other guys are deaf too?" another one of the girls said. "Yeah, but they're not as cute as her brother." There were 3 hearing guys playing against Sean and his friends. From the looks of it, the hearing guys were winning. I didn't want to see that. Not with those girls behind me. Not with the deaf guys trying so hard and all. I got up after a few minutes and signed to Sean that I'd meet him in the hallway. He nodded and I left the gym. Kids were running around and there were a few grown-ups trying to get them to use walking feet. I leaned against the wall, watching it all. There was a poster across from me listing all the rules of the rec center. Next to each rule, instead of a number, there was a big yellow smiley face. Next to the rule that said, "No graffiti," somebody had magic markered their name in a frowning face. I was smiling over that when I saw the Jesus boy coming out of the boys' locker room, zipping up his coat, his hair wet and curling over his shoulders. I stopped smiling. Maybe he felt me staring because he looked up suddenly. I just kept staring at him. "Hey," he said when he got a little bit closer. "Hey yourself." "What are you doing here, Franny?" It felt strange to hear him say my name. "It's a free country." He moved a little bit closer to me. "That's what they say." He signed the word "say." "How come you know sign anyway?" The Jesus boy stopped, smiling, thought for a minute, then shrugged. "I don't know," he said slowly, like he was really trying to understand. "That doesn't make any sense." "I just know it," he said. "I just do. Maybe from when I was a baby or something." "Well, it's not something a person's born knowing," I said. "Well, how come you know English?" "Because my family knows English, and that's what they taught me." Jesus boy shrugged again. "So maybe it's the same for me. Maybe somebody in my family knew it one time." I shook my head. "That doesn't make even a little bit of sense." "Does to me," he said. "Do they sign now?" He made the sign for maybe and smiled at me. I signed back. Maybe you're crazy. Well, what made you sign to me the other day? I asked. I saw you walking with that guy who signs. You two were talking to each other. That's my brother, I said. Sean. Yeah, Jesus Boy said. I was kind of far away when I saw you, but y'all look alike. No, we don't, I said. Sean was beautiful. Everybody could see that. I was just regular. We just sort of stood there for a while, watching people go by. I'm waiting for my dad, Jesus Boy said. Maybe I should be waiting outside. Well, goodbye then, I said. The Jesus Boy looked at me sideways but didn't move. You really lived across the highway? I asked. Jesus Boy nodded. What was that like, to live over there? It would have been okay for me, but it wasn't okay for my mom and dad, he said. It was hard for them. People can be silly. Once this cop stopped us and asked me if I knew my dad. Me and my dad were fooling around, kind of wrestling and stuff. He thought my dad was trying to hurt me. He looked at me, then said, I don't look like him, I guess. How come? He stared at the poster with the smiley faces. Just 'cause. It doesn't really matter. I used to wish that I would wake up and look just like him. I still do sometimes. I look at him and he's so cool and... He stopped. I watched him, waiting for him to say something more, but he didn't. Just put his hands in his pockets and stood there. 2 little kids ran by us, but slowed down to stare at us. Take a picture, I said. It lasts longer. The little girl stuck her tongue out at me, then she and her friend ran off. Jesus Boy smiled. His eye teeth were kind of fangy. Someone pulled the rec center door open and a group of boys came in making a lot of noise. I could see Trevor in the middle of them, his coat hanging off the arm that had the cast on it. When he saw us, he stopped. If it ain't Mr. and Mrs. Jesus, he said. The other guys with him looked at us. One of them laughed. You still here? The Jesus Boy looked at him. I'm still here. One of the guys said, Come on, Trev, as they started walking away. Trevor told them to go ahead. He'd catch up. You know, I don't even like you, Trevor said. You don't even know me, man. I ain't your man, white boy. The Jesus Boy looked at him calmly and said, Well, I ain't your white boy, man. We could take this outside, Trevor said. You go ahead, the Jesus Boy said. I'll meet you there. Trevor looked at him, his blue eyes getting smaller and more evil. I wanted to ask him what he planned to do with his arm in a cast and all, but then the door opened and a tall, dark-skinned man came in, looked around, then saw us. You ready? He said to the Jesus Boy. The Jesus Boy nodded. This is Franny. Franny, this is my pops. That's Trevor. I felt my eyebrows lifting up and tried to make them go down again. Hey, Franny. I managed to say hello, but Trevor just stood there a moment staring at the man. Then, without saying anything, he turned and took off down the hall. The little girls were back, staring at all 3 of us now. Let's get moving, Jesus Boy's dad said. We got things to do. As they were leaving, I heard him ask the Jesus Boy how his swim was. I couldn't hear the answer. Is that white boy your boyfriend? One of the little girls asked. I had forgotten they were standing there. Oh, scat out of here already, I said, waving my hands at them. They squealed and ran off. But later on, when Sean came out of the gym all sweaty and pulling on his coat, I was still thinking about the Jesus Boy and his daddy. You're always following me, Sean signed. You like it, I signed back. How come you didn't watch the whole game? We went crazy on those guys. They didn't know what was happening to them once we got warmed up. You missed my winning shot. He took a jump shot, throwing his basketball in the air and catching it. I thought about the girls in the bleachers, then brushed the thought out of my head. It got too hot in there, I signed, and stinky. Sean laughed and chucked me on the head again. Down the hall, I could see Trevor and his friends standing around in a circle. I heard the guard telling them to get out of the hallway and saw Trevor give the guard a mean look. You can get out of the hallway or you can leave, the guard said. Let's go play some pinball, one of the boys said, and the others followed him down the hall to the game room. Come on, Lefty, he said, looking at Trevor. Let's see what you got with that one good hand. Trevor smiled and his face looked almost normal, soft and happy. Isn't that kid in your class? Sean asked. I nodded. How come you didn't go hang out with them then? I watched Trevor move down the hall with his friends. I don't like him. Beggars can't be choosy, Sean said, smiling and tapping my head again. I know, I said. That's why I'm stuck with you. And as we walked out into the snow, I lifted my head up to catch the flakes on my tongue, feeling them melting in my mouth and somehow warming me.